The mistake Claire Whitman made that night was opening the wrong door. But the real danger was that someone inside had been waiting for a woman exactly like her. She was 10 minutes late, out of breath, and one unpaid daycare bill away from losing the only evening job she had managed to find all month. The Grand Ellison Hotel rose above downtown Chicago like a palace made of glass and gold, its front entrance glowing under rows of warm lights, while polished cars slid up to the curb as if the whole city had dressed itself for one perfect night. Claire did not belong in that kind of place, and she knew it before the doorman even looked at her worn black flats, her thrift store dress, and the old leather tote pressed tightly against her ribs. She had borrowed the dress from a neighbor, pinned the loose hem herself, and prayed no one would notice the tiny tear near the zipper. In her left hand, she held a temporary event badge that read, Whitman, Claire, Service Staff, and in her right hand, she held her phone, the battery blinking red at 2%. Please, just let me get through one shift, she whispered, not to anyone in particular, but to the version of herself that had been holding everything together for too long. Her daughter, Lily, was waiting at Happy Steps Daycare several blocks away, wearing pink sneakers Claire had bought secondhand and carrying a stuffed rabbit with one missing button eye. The daycare closed in 2 hours. The late fee was $15 for every 10 minutes after pickup, and Claire had exactly $11 in cash folded inside her coat pocket. If she finished this wedding shift, she could pay the fee, buy cough medicine, and maybe put gas in Mrs. Alvarez's car if her neighbor agreed to drive them home. That was the math of her life now. Every hope divided into dollars. Every mistake charged with interest. The agency coordinator had texted her simple instructions. Staff entrance, second floor, Hall C. But the hotel was larger than any building Claire had worked in before, with mirrored elevators, marble floors, and hallways that curved like they were designed to confuse people who did not already belong there. A bellman pointed toward a bank of elevators without looking up from his phone. Claire rushed inside, pressed the button for the second floor, then stepped out into a corridor lined with white roses and candles floating in glass bowls. Music drifted through the air, soft and expensive. She saw a gold sign ahead that read, Veil Wedding, and beneath it, smaller letters that looked, in her panic, enough like Hall C. Her phone buzzed once before the screen went black. No battery, no map, no second chance to check. Claire swallowed hard, adjusted the tote on her shoulder, and pushed open the tall double doors. The room beyond was breathtaking. Hundreds of guests sat beneath crystal chandeliers, all turned toward a flower-covered arch where a bride in a sweeping gown stood beside a groom in a white tuxedo. For one strange second, Claire thought she had walked into a movie. Then the music stopped. Every face turned toward her. The minister had been speaking, his hand raised over the couple, and the words still hung in the silent air. If anyone here has reason why these two should not be married. Claire froze with one hand still on the door handle. The sound of her own breathing seemed too loud. 100 polished heads turned, then 200 eyes, then every whisper in the room gathered itself around her like smoke. The bride's smile faded first. She was beautiful in the effortless way rich women in magazines were beautiful, with diamonds at her throat and a veil that shimmered like water. Her gaze slid over Claire's dress, her work badge, her scuffed shoes, and stopped at the old tote bag pressed against her side. The groom blinked as if trying to place her. Somewhere near the front row, a woman gasped softly. Claire's cheeks burned. I'm so sorry, she said, but her voice came out smaller than she meant it to. I'm staff. I think I have the wrong hall. No one moved. The silence became heavier, sharper. A few people glanced at one another, the way people did when they were embarrassed for someone but still wanted to see what happened next. Claire took one step backward, but the heel of her shoe caught on the threshold. Her tote slipped from her shoulder, and several things spilled across the polished floor. A folded daycare invoice, a bottle of children's fever reducer, a crumpled bus schedule, and Lily's tiny pink hair clip. A ripple of whispers moved through the guests. Claire dropped to her knees instantly, gathering everything with trembling hands, wishing the floor would open beneath her and take her somewhere quiet, somewhere no one could see how hard she was trying not to fall apart. That's a service entrance mistake, the bride said coldly, her voice carrying all the way to the back of the hall. A few guests laughed under their breath. Claire kept her eyes down. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. But before she could collect the last paper, a man's black dress shoe stepped beside it. Not on it. Beside it. Still, deliberate, close enough to make her pause. Claire looked up only far enough to see a hand reach down and pick up the daycare invoice before anyone else could read it. The man standing above her wore a black suit so perfectly tailored it seemed cut from shadow, his face unreadable beneath the chandelier light. He did not smile. He did not speak. He only looked at the name printed on the top of the paper, Lily Whitman. And for one brief second, something changed in his eyes. The man in black held the daycare invoice as if it weighed more than paper should. Claire noticed the change in him, but she had no space in her mind to wonder about it. Every second she stayed on her knees in that glittering hall made the room feel larger, colder, and less forgiving. She reached for the invoice, her fingers shaking. "That is mine," she whispered. "Please." The man looked from the printed name back to her face. For a moment, he seemed as though he wanted to ask something, but the bride's sharp voice cut through the silence before he could speak. "Is this supposed to be some kind of joke?" Madison Vale stepped forward, her white gown sweeping over the floor like a warning. Up close, her beauty looked harder, sculpted by money and certainty. "Because if someone from the hotel thought it would be funny to interrupt my vows, I promise the Ellison family will hear about it before the cake is cut." A nervous laugh rose from somewhere near the front row. Claire felt it land on her skin like cold rain. "No, ma'am," she said quickly, gathering the fever reducer and Lily's pink hair clip into her tote. "I was hired through an agency for an event tonight. I went to the wrong room. I am sorry. I will leave right now." "You already said that," Madison replied. "Yet somehow you are still in the middle of my wedding." The groom leaned closer to Madison and murmured something, but she lifted one hand without looking at him, silencing him with the ease of someone used to being obeyed. A bridesmaid in pale champagne satin tilted her head and looked Claire over from her messy hair to the worn toes of her flats. "She is definitely not on our staff list," the bridesmaid said loudly enough for several rows to hear. "Our servers are in uniform." Another woman whispered, "Maybe she came in from the street." The words were not shouted, but they did not need to be. They traveled. They grew. Claire stood slowly, clutching her tote with both hands. Her badge swung against her chest, suddenly useless proof of something no one cared to believe. "I have identification," she said. "I can show hotel security. I was supposed to be in Hall C." "This is Hall B," Madison said, each word clipped and polished. "Hall C is across the west corridor. There are signs everywhere." Claire looked toward the open doors behind her, and her throat tightened. There had been signs, yes, but signs were easier to follow when your phone was not dead, when your child was not sick, when your rent was not late, when your whole life was not balanced on a single shift you could not afford to lose. She did not say any of that. People like Madison Vale did not hear explanations. They only heard excuses. "I apologize," Claire said again, because apology had become her most practiced language. "I will go." She bent to pick up the last fallen item, but before she could reach it, a young man in the second row leaned forward and squinted at her. His expression shifted from amusement to recognition. "Wait a second," he said. "Claire Whitman." The name moved through the hall faster than the whispers had. Claire's hand stopped. Above the paper. Her stomach sank. She knew that voice. Preston Mercer. Ryan's cousin. The kind of man who treated other people's pain like a story he was entitled to retell. Preston smiled with the bright cruelty of someone finding entertainment in an unexpected place. "I knew I recognized you. You used to be with Ryan, did you not?" Claire straightened, her face draining of color. "This is not the time." "Small world," Preston continued, turning toward the guests near him as if inviting them into a private joke. "Ryan always said you had a flair for dramatic entrances." A few people chuckled. Claire's fingers tightened around the strap of her tote until it cut into her palm. She looked toward the doors, then back at the aisle. She could leave if everyone would simply stop looking at her. She could still find Hall C. She could still work. She could still make it to Lily. But Preston was already standing, enjoying himself too much to stop. "Do you still have the kid?" he asked, his tone falsely casual. "What was her name again?" Claire's body went still. The room did too, but for a different reason. People loved scandal more than ceremony when scandal arrived wearing a cheap black dress and carrying proof of a life they could judge. Madison's eyes narrowed, catching the shift. "You know her?" she asked Preston. Sort of, Preston said. Family history. Not mine directly, thank goodness. Claire finally found her voice, and it came out low but steady. Do not talk about my daughter. The man in black, still standing beside her, lowered his gaze to the invoice in his hand again. His thumb rested near Lily's name. Something in his jaw tightened, barely visible, but real. Madison looked between Claire and Preston, irritation turning into interest. So this was not just a staff mistake. It was, Claire said. I came through the wrong door. That is all. Then leave through the right one, Madison said. And take whatever little drama you brought with you. The words were soft, but the room heard every syllable. Claire reached for the invoice one more time. This time, the man in black gave it back carefully, his fingers not brushing hers, his voice still absent. She expected judgment in his eyes. Instead, she saw something worse, recognition she did not understand. She shoved the paper into her tote, lowered her head, and turned toward the doors while the chandeliers blurred above her. Behind her, the minister cleared his throat, trying to stitch the ceremony back together. The music resumed, thin and uncertain. Claire stepped into the corridor, and only after the doors closed did she let one breath break inside her chest. She did not see the man in black turn away from the wedding. She did not see Madison watching him with sudden alarm. She did not hear someone whisper his name like a warning. All she heard was the echo of her own shoes moving too fast across the marble floor, until a second pair of footsteps followed her into the hallway, quiet, measured, and getting closer. Claire did not run until she reached the end of the corridor, but every step felt like running. The marble floor reflected her shape in broken pieces, black dress, loose hair, shaking hands, old tote bag pressed to her side like a shield. Behind the closed doors, the wedding music had started again, pretending nothing had happened, pretending a room full of strangers had not just peeled open the worst parts of her life and stared at them under chandeliers. She turned a corner near a row of framed oil paintings and stopped beside a tall window overlooking Michigan Avenue. The city lights blurred through the glass. For 1 second, she let her forehead touch the cool pane and tried to breathe slowly, the way the free clinic counselor had taught her months ago. In for 4 counts. Hold for 4. Out for 4. But the counting did not work tonight. Preston Mercer's voice kept following her. Do you still have the kid? Claire closed her eyes. Lily was not a scandal. Lily was not a mistake. Lily was the reason Claire got up before sunrise, accepted shifts that paid too little, smiled at people who looked through her, and kept walking even when her feet hurt so badly she wanted to sit down on the sidewalk and cry. Lily was 5 years old, with serious blue eyes, tangled blonde curls, and a habit of saving half her crackers for stuffed animals because she did. Not like anyone being hungry, even pretend rabbits. She was not something a man in a tuxedo got to turn into a joke. Claire opened her tote with trembling fingers and checked the items inside as if touching them could make her world orderly again. Fever reducer, bus schedule, daycare invoice, hair clip, badge, $11. No phone battery. She pulled out the invoice and saw the corner bent where the man in black had held it. Lily Whitman. Emergency balance due. Late pickup warning. Her throat tightened. If she lost Happy Steps daycare, she would lose the temp shifts. If she lost the temp shifts, she would lose the apartment. Every piece of her life leaned on another piece that was already cracking. She folded the paper quickly and shoved it deeper into the bag, then turned toward the service hallway. Halsey had to be close. She still had time to apologize to the agency's supervisor, put on an apron, and disappear into the work where no one asked questions as long as the glasses stayed full and the plate stayed moving. But when she stepped forward, she heard the second pair of footsteps again. Not rushed, not uncertain, measured, quiet, and too close to be coincidence. Claire turned sharply. The man in black stood several yards behind her beneath a wall sconce, half his face lit in gold, the other half shadowed. He was taller than she had realized in the wedding hall, broad-shouldered without seeming careless about the space he occupied. His black suit was simple at first glance, but there was something about the fit, the watch at his wrist, the calm in his posture, that told Claire he belonged to rooms where other people waited for permission to speak. She tightened her grip on the tote. If Madison Vale sent you to make sure I leave, you can tell her I am going, she said. I do not want trouble. He studied her for a moment, not with pity exactly, and not with the cold curiosity she had expected, but with a focus that made her feel both seen and unsafe. Madison did not send me. His voice was low, controlled, the kind of voice that did not need volume to make people listen. Claire glanced behind him, expecting security, a manager, someone with a clipboard, ready to blacklist her from the agency. No one was there. Then why are you following me? The question came out sharper than she intended, but fear often borrowed the shape of anger. He took one slow step closer and stopped immediately when she stiffened. Because you dropped something. You gave it back. Not everything. He reached into his jacket, and Claire's heart jumped before she saw what he held between two fingers. Lily's tiny pink hair clip, shaped like a butterfly with one chipped wing. Claire's face changed before she could stop it. She reached for it quickly. Thank you. He placed it in her palm, and again he was careful not to touch her. That carefulness unsettled her more than rudeness would have. Rude people were familiar. Careful people made her wonder what they wanted. Your daughter, he said. Claire's hand closed around the clip. Do not. The word was soft, but it carried every warning she had left. Do not ask about my child. Something moved across his face then, a flicker so brief, she almost missed it. Regret, maybe. Or memory. I saw her name. A lot of people saw too much tonight. I am not a lot of people. Claire almost laughed, but there was no humor in her. Men who say that usually are. For the first time, his expression shifted, not into a smile, but into the ghost of one that died before it arrived. Fair enough. Silence stretched between them, filled by the distant murmur of music and applause from the wedding hall. Claire should have walked away. She knew that. But something about the way he had looked at Lily's name made her feet stay where they were. Who are you? She asked. He did not answer right away. His gaze dropped to the butterfly clip in her hand, then returned to her face. Someone who should have asked a question a long time ago. Claire's breath caught, though she did not know why. Before she could respond, the lights overhead flickered softly as another elevator opened at the far end of the corridor. A hotel manager stepped out, saw the man in black, and immediately straightened as if the air itself had changed. Sir, the manager called, nervous and respectful. The Vale family is asking why you left the ceremony. Claire turned back to the stranger, her pulse suddenly loud in her ears. Sir, not security, not a guest trying to be kind. Someone important enough to make a manager hurry. The man did not look at the manager. He looked only at Claire, and when he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than before. What is your daughter's father's name? Claire felt the question land in the narrow hallway like a key turning inside a locked door. For a moment, even the hotel seemed to hold its breath. The manager stood near the elevator with his hands clasped too tightly in front of him, waiting for the man in black to respond to the Vale family, but the man did not look away from Claire. His question had been quiet, almost careful, yet it struck deeper than the laughter in the wedding hall. What is your daughter's father's name? Claire slid Lily's butterfly clip into the pocket of her coat and stepped back. That is none of your business. The manager's eyes widened slightly, as if no one in the Grand Ellison spoke to this man that way, but Claire had no room left for politeness. She had spent 5 years answering questions from landlords, daycare directors, social workers, doctors, employers, and strangers who thought a woman alone with a child owed the world an explanation. She did not owe this stranger one, no matter how expensive his suit was or how nervous hotel staff became when he entered a hallway. Miss Whitman, the manager began, his tone stiff with warning. You are speaking to. The man lifted one hand, and the manager stopped immediately. Not reluctantly. Immediately. Claire saw it then, the invisible line of power around him, the kind that made grown men swallow words they had already formed. The realization should have frightened her more, but all she could think about was Lily waiting several blocks away, flushed and tired, probably asking the daycare teacher when Mommy was coming. I need to get to Hall C, Claire said, forcing her voice to stay level. I was hired to work an event. I made a mistake, and I am already late. You are not going to Hall C, the man said. Claire stared at him. Excuse me. Your daughter is sick. You have a dead phone. $11, and a daycare invoice that says this is your final late pickup warning. Her face went hot, then cold. You read my private paper. I read enough to know you are standing in a luxury hotel worrying about a shift while your child needs you. His voice did not accuse her, but Claire heard accusation anyway because guilt had been living inside her too long. Do you think I do not know that? She whispered. Do you think I want to be here carrying trays for people who laugh at me while my little girl waits for me with a fever? I am here because if I miss this shift, I cannot pay the daycare. If I cannot pay the daycare, I cannot work. If I cannot work, I cannot keep our apartment. So please, do not stand there in your $1,000 suit and tell me what kind of mother I should be." The manager looked down at the floor. The man in black went very still. Claire expected him to defend himself, to explain, to offer one of those clean rich person solutions that sounded generous until they turned into debt. Instead, he said nothing for several seconds. Outside the tall windows, rain began to streak across the glass, thin silver lines under the city lights. "You are right," he said at last. Claire blinked. "What? I do not get to tell you what kind of mother you should be." His eyes moved briefly toward the closed wedding doors. "But I can tell you that the agency will not dock your pay tonight." Claire frowned. "You cannot promise that." The manager cleared his throat softly. "Actually, Miss Whitman, he can." The man turned his head only slightly. "Make sure she is paid for the full shift. Add the late arrival fee as a hotel error. Then find out who sent temporary staff to the wrong entrance without proper directions." The manager nodded so quickly Claire almost forgot to breathe. "Yes, sir. And arrange a car with a child seat." "Right away, sir." Claire's heart began to pound for a different reason. "No. Wait. I did not ask for that." The man looked back at her. "I know. Then do not order things around me like I am furniture." The words came out before she could soften them. The manager looked horrified. The man, strangely, looked almost relieved. As if her anger made more sense to him than her apology had. "Fair," he said. "Then I will ask. May I arrange a car so you can get to your daughter?" Claire wanted to say no. Pride rose first, sharp and familiar. Pride had been the only thing left some nights after Ryan Mercer emptied their future and disappeared. Pride had helped her walk into food pantries with her head up, sit through job interviews in shoes that pinched, and tell Lily that peanut butter toast was a picnic when it was really all they had left. But pride would not lower Lily's fever. Pride would not carry Claire several blocks through Chicago rain. "Why?" she asked, and this time the words sounded less angry, more tired. "Why do you care?" The man's gaze shifted again, not away exactly, but inward, toward a place he did not seem ready to open. "Because when I heard your daughter's name, I remembered someone I failed to look for." Claire did not understand the answer, and that made it more frightening than a simple lie. The elevator opened with a soft chime, and another hotel employee hurried out holding a portable phone. "Miss Whitman," she asked. "Happy Steps Daycare is on the line. They said your phone is off, and this is urgent." Claire's world narrowed to the receiver in the woman's hand. She took it so quickly her fingers nearly slipped. "This is Claire." A familiar voice came through, strained but gentle. "Claire, it is Marcy. Lily's fever is higher, and she got upset when you did not answer. She kept saying she was going to find you at the big hotel." Claire's breath caught. "What do you mean?" There was a pause, and in that pause the hallway lost all sound. Then Marcy said the words Claire would never forget. "We cannot find her in the classroom." Claire's knees nearly gave out, but she did not fall. She gripped the hotel phone so tightly her knuckles turned pale and forced herself to hear every word Marcy was saying. "What do you mean you cannot find her?" Claire asked, her voice thin and shaking. "She was in the quiet corner with Ms. Dana 10 minutes ago," Marcy said, trying to stay calm and failing just enough for Claire to hear it. "She was upset because your phone went straight to voicemail. She kept saying she knew where you were working because you told Mrs. Alvarez it was the big hotel with the gold doors. We are checking the lobby, the hallway, the playground, everywhere. I already called building security." Claire pressed her free hand against her mouth. She had said that. That morning, while tying Lily's sneakers, she had told Mrs. Alvarez the hotel was easy to recognize because it had gold doors and lights like a castle. Lily had been sitting on the floor, brushing her rabbit's ears, listening to everything the way children did when adults thought they were not paying attention. She would not leave, Claire whispered, but even as she said it, she remembered Lily's stubborn little chin, the way her daughter believed finding mommy could fix any problem in the world. She is 5. She is sick. She would be scared. The hallway blurred again, but before panic could swallow her, the man in black was beside her, not touching her, not crowding her, only close enough that his voice reached her clearly. "Ask them whether any exit doors triggered." Claire looked at him, confused and terrified. He nodded once toward the phone. "Ask." Claire swallowed. Marcy, did any exit doors open? Did an alarm go off? She heard muffled voices on the other end, someone calling to someone else. Then Marcy came back. The front door camera showed a small child leaving with a group of parents from the after-school pickup rush. She had a pink coat and a stuffed rabbit. Claire, I am so sorry. We think she may have headed toward Michigan Avenue. The phone slipped slightly in Claire's hand. Several blocks. Rain. Traffic. Lily trying to find a hotel in downtown Chicago with a fever and a stuffed rabbit. For one breath, Claire could not speak. Every sound in the hallway became too sharp. The elevator chime, the rain against the windows, the distant music from Madison Vale's Perfect Wedding still floating behind closed doors, while Claire's whole world moved somewhere outside in the dark. I am coming, she said finally. Stay on the line. Please stay on the line. But the man in black was already moving. He turned to the manager with a calm, so absolute it almost seemed impossible. Lock the exterior camera feeds. Contact front desk, valet, and security. Pull every camera from the daycare route to the hotel, north and south sidewalks, alley exits, service entrances, parking garage, and taxi stand. Send Lily Whitman's description to every staff radio. Pink coat, stuffed rabbit, 5 years old, likely looking for her mother. The manager's face went pale, but he nodded and lifted his radio. Yes, sir. Claire stared at the man. How do you know they can do all that? He looked at her then, and the answer was in the silence before he said it. Because this hotel is mine. The word should have changed everything, but Claire had no space left to be impressed. A billionaire could own every chandelier in the building and still not know where her daughter was. Then use it, she said, her voice breaking. Please. He did not flinch at the please. If anything, it seemed to hit him harder than her anger had. We will find her. Do not promise me things. I am not promising comfort. I am telling you what happens next. He turned toward the elevator. You are coming with me to security. Claire followed because there was no other direction in the world anymore. They moved fast through the corridor, past white roses, past a banquet captain who stepped aside with wide eyes, past a service cart stacked with silver trays. The elevator doors opened before they reached them, as if the building itself obeyed him. Inside, Claire clutched the phone to her ear, but Marcy had handed off to someone else at the daycare, a man giving updates that were not updates at all. Still checking. No sign yet. Police non-emergency had been contacted. Staff searching nearby blocks. Each sentence felt like a hand pressing harder against Claire's chest. The man stood beside her, close but careful, watching the floor numbers descend. What does she answer to? He asked. Lily, Claire said. Sometimes Lil. If she is scared, she does not talk much. Favorite thing? Claire blinked through tears. Her rabbit. Mr. Button. She thinks he gets cold faster than she does. The man nodded, as if that detail mattered, as if the name of a stuffed rabbit belonged in the same command system as cameras and security radios. We will tell staff not to rush toward her. They will kneel, say her mother is inside, and mention Mr. Button. Claire looked at him then, really looked. Not at the suit, not at the watch, not at the quiet authority that made people move. At the concentration in his face. At the way he was building a plan around a frightened child he had never met. Why are you doing this? She whispered. The elevator opened to a lower-level security office filled with monitors. The man did not answer until they stepped inside, and every screen seemed to glow with pieces of the hotel and the rainy streets around it. Then one of the guards leaned forward. Sir, I have something. Claire stopped breathing. On the center monitor, a small figure in a pink coat moved through the hotel's revolving front doors, clutching a stuffed rabbit against her chest. She was not heading away from the Grand Ellison. She was walking straight toward the wedding entrance. Claire pressed both hands against the edge of the security desk as if the wood beneath her palms was the only thing keeping her upright. On the monitor, Lily appeared impossibly small against the revolving doors, her pink coat damp at the shoulders, her stuffed rabbit tucked under one arm, her other hand reaching up to push messy blonde curls away from her flushed face. She was not crying. Somehow that made it worse. Claire knew that look. Lily only became that quiet when she was trying to be brave for both of them. Zoom in, the man in black said. His voice remained steady, but Claire heard something underneath it now, something tightened and personal. The guard enlarged the image. Lily stepped away from the lobby entrance and looked around at the golden lights, the tall flower arrangements, the guests drifting in and out beneath umbrellas. She was searching faces, searching for Claire. That camera is live? Claire asked. Less than 30 seconds behind, the guard said. She is still near the main entrance. Claire turned for the door, but the man moved with her. We go together. No, she said immediately. You have already done enough. Not yet. The guard's radio crackled. Before she could argue. Front lobby to security. We have visual on a little girl in a pink coat. She just walked past the escort table toward the east ballroom corridor. Claire's heart lurched. The east corridor led back toward Madison Vale's wedding. Of course Lily would follow the flowers, the music, the brightest doorway. She would think any beautiful room in the big hotel might contain her mother. Claire started walking fast, then faster, the man beside her matching her pace without trying to lead. They moved through a back hallway, then past a service elevator, then into the public corridor where laughter and music spilled from the wedding hall. A banquet server carrying a tray stopped mid-step when he saw the man in black. Sir, clear the corridor, the man said. Quietly. The server nodded and moved. Claire barely noticed. Her eyes had locked on a small shape near the ballroom doors. Lily stood under an arch of white roses, her cheeks flushed, her hair damp from rain, one sneaker untied. Mr. Button clutched to her chest so tightly the rabbit's worn ears folded over her fingers. She was looking through the open doors at the ceremony beyond, confused by the rows of guests, the candles, the bride in white, the hundreds of strangers. Then she saw Claire. Mommy. The word was small, but it crossed the hallway like a bell. Claire's breath broke. Lily. She hurried forward and dropped to her knees, gathering her daughter into her arms before another second could pass. Lily's little body was warm, too warm, and trembling from cold and fear. I found the gold doors, Lily whispered against her shoulder. Your phone was sleeping. I thought maybe you got lost. Claire closed her eyes and held her tighter. Oh, sweetheart. I am so sorry. I am so sorry. You never leave daycare, okay? Never. Even for mommy. Lily nodded weakly, rubbing her face against Claire's coat. I was trying to be brave. You were very brave, Claire said, her voice breaking. But now you stay with me. Behind them, the open ballroom doors had drawn attention. The minister had stopped again. Madison Vale turned from the altar, her expression shifting from confusion to irritation the moment. She recognized Claire. Guests began looking over their shoulders. Preston Mercer rose halfway from his seat, his mouth opening with the ugly excitement of a man who saw another chance to be cruel. Claire stood with Lily in her arms and tried to move away, but a hotel attendant near the door, uncertain and flustered, stepped into their path. Ma'am, this area is restricted during the ceremony. Claire shook her head. I am leaving. Then leave faster. Madison called from inside the hall, her voice sweet enough to sound almost polite and sharp enough to cut. And please take the child with you before she wanders into the aisle. Lily flinched and buried her face against Claire's shoulder. Something changed in the man in black. Until that moment, he had been quiet, contained, careful. But when Lily flinched, the air around him seemed to harden. He stepped past Claire, not dramatically, not loudly, but with such certainty that every person near the doorway shifted back. No one speaks to the child like that. Madison stared at him, startled. Ethan, this is my wedding. Claire's mind caught on the name, but only for a second. Ethan. The manager had called him sir. The staff obeyed him. Madison knew him. Then behave like it, he said. The room went still. Madison's face colored. Excuse me. Ethan Blackwell did not raise his voice. He did not need to. A 5-year-old girl came here scared, sick, and looking for her mother. If your first instinct is to humiliate her in front of your guests, that tells me more about this wedding than any vow spoken tonight. The silence that followed was so complete that Claire heard Lily's soft breathing against her neck. Preston let out a short laugh, then seemed to think better of it when Ethan turned his eyes toward him. And you? Ethan said. Sit down. Preston sat. Claire should have been frightened by that kind of authority, but all she felt was the strange, dizzying relief of not being alone in a room that wanted to shrink her. A hotel manager hurried into the corridor, breathless. Mr. Blackwell, the car is ready, and pediatric urgent care has been notified. They can see the child immediately. The whispers began then, spreading through the wedding guests like wind through silk. Mr. Blackwell. Ethan Blackwell. The owner. Claire looked at him, truly understanding for the first time that the stranger who had followed her into the hallway owned not just the hotel, but the power to end the shame pressing around her. Ethan turned back to Claire, and his expression softened when his eyes reached Lily. "May I help you get her to the car?" Claire wanted to refuse. She wanted to keep one final piece of control, but Lily shivered in her arms and whispered, "Mommy, my head feels hot." Claire nodded once. Ethan removed his black overcoat and held it out, not for Claire, but for Lily. "For Mr. Button too," he said quietly. Lily peeked at him through damp lashes. "He gets cold." "I thought he might." Claire wrapped the coat around her daughter. As the expensive fabric settled over Lily's small shoulders, something slipped free from beneath the collar of her dress, catching the chandelier light. A small silver pendant swung against the pink coat, shaped like a black-winged bird in flight. Ethan stopped moving. His face changed so completely that Claire forgot the wedding, the guests, even Madison's stare. He looked at the necklace as if the past had just stepped into the room wearing a child's face. "Claire," he said, his voice suddenly unsteady. "Where did she get that?" Claire instinctively covered the pendant with her hand, not because she knew what it meant, but because Ethan Blackwell's face had gone so pale that the necklace suddenly felt dangerous. Around them, the wedding hall remained frozen between ceremony and scandal. Every guest watching the billionaire owner of the Grand Ellison stare at a 5-year-old child as though a secret had just spoken his name. Lily, still wrapped in Ethan's black overcoat, leaned against Claire's shoulder and blinked sleepily at him. "It is my bird," she said in a small voice. "Daddy gave it to Mommy before I was born." Claire felt the words pass through her like a cold thread. She had not said Ryan's name in front of Lily in months. She had tried to make her daughter's father a soft absence instead of an open wound, something Lily could ask about, without seeing Claire's face change. But children collected truth from the cracks adults left behind. Ethan took one step closer, then stopped himself, as if he had remembered that every movement mattered. "May I see it?" he asked, not Claire but Lily. That surprised her. Most adults asked over children, around children, through children. Ethan lowered himself slightly, not touching, not reaching, simply waiting. Lily looked at Claire first. Claire's heart was pounding, but she nodded once. With careful fingers, Lily lifted the pendant away from her dress. The silver bird swung gently under the chandelier light. Its wings curved in a shape Claire had always thought looked unusual, almost too sharp for a simple charm. Ethan's breath caught. It was subtle, but Claire heard it. So did Madison, who had stepped down from the altar now, her veil gathered in one hand and irritation sharpened by embarrassment. "Ethan, are we really stopping my wedding over a child's necklace?" she asked. Ethan did not look at her. "This symbol belongs to my family." The whispers returned, louder this time, rolling through rows of satin and tuxedos. Claire stared at him. "That is impossible. Where did you get it?" His voice was quiet again, but not calm. "Not anymore. You asked me that already. I am asking because I gave that pendant to my younger brother 13 years ago." Claire's grip tightened around Lily. The room seemed to tilt the way it had when the daycare call came through. "Your brother?" Ethan nodded, his eyes still fixed on the necklace. "Caleb Blackwell." Claire shook her head slowly. "No. Lily's father was Ryan Mercer." Preston made a small sound from the second row. Not a laugh this time. Something closer to alarm. Ethan's eyes shifted toward him. "You know that name." Preston looked away too quickly. Madison caught the movement and frowned. "Preston." Claire turned toward him, her fears sharpening into recognition. "You knew Ryan. You just said you did." Preston adjusted his cuff links, trying to recover the careless smile he had worn earlier. "A lot of people know a lot of people in Chicago." "Did you know his real name?" Claire asked. The question came out before. She understood it, but once it was spoken, it filled the hall. Preston did not answer. That silence did more than any confession could have. Ethan rose to his full height, and the power in the room shifted back to him with frightening ease. "Say it carefully," he said. Preston swallowed. "Ryan used different names sometimes. That does not mean anything." Claire felt Lily's warm forehead rest against her neck. Her daughter was sick, exhausted, and wrapped in the coat of a man who might be connected to the one person Claire had spent years trying to survive. "I need to take her to urgent care," Claire said. "Whatever this is, it can wait." Ethan looked back at Lily, and the intensity in him softened just enough to become human again. "You are right. Madison laughed once, incredulous. So that is it. You are leaving? Ethan, people are waiting. He finally turned to her. Then let them wait with more kindness than they showed a mother and child. Madison's face tightened. Ethan handed a business card to the manager without looking away from Claire. Clear the private exit. Have the car brought around with the child's seat. Tell urgent care we are 5 minutes out. Yes, Mr. Blackwell. Claire moved toward the corridor, Lily heavy in her arms. Ethan walked beside them, not ahead, not behind, as if he had learned within minutes that Claire would not tolerate being led like she belonged to anyone. At the doorway, Preston suddenly stood. Claire, he called. She stopped, though every instinct told her not to. Preston's face had lost all its amusement. Ryan left something with my aunt before he disappeared. A letter. He said it was for the woman with the little girl, if she ever came looking. Claire could not breathe. Ethan went perfectly still beside her. Lily stirred under the black coat and whispered, Mommy, is Daddy coming back? Claire had no answer. Preston looked from Claire to Ethan, then down at the silver bird resting against Lily's chest. There is one more thing, he said. The letter has the Blackwell seal on it. Claire did not remember deciding to move again. One moment she was standing at the edge of the ballroom, with Lily burning warm against her chest, Preston Mercer's words hanging behind her like a door left open to a room she had never known existed. And the next moment, she was walking beside Ethan Blackwell through a private corridor lined with cream walls and silent portraits of people who looked like they had never begged a daycare for one more week to pay. The wedding music faded behind them, replaced by the soft hum of elevators and the rain ticking against tall windows. Lily's head rested beneath Claire's chin, tucked inside Ethan's black overcoat, her small fingers still holding the silver bird pendant as if it were the only familiar thing in a night that had become too large. Mommy, Lily whispered, her voice drowsy and rough with fever. Is that man mad about my necklace? Claire looked down at her daughter's flushed cheeks and forced her voice to stay gentle. No, baby. He is just surprised. Ethan, walking on Claire's other side, heard her. His face changed at the word surprised, as if it was too small for what he was feeling, but he did not correct her. The private elevator opened onto a covered side entrance where a black SUV waited with its hazard lights blinking softly in the rain. A driver stood by the rear door, and inside, Claire saw a child safety seat already secured with careful precision. The sight nearly broke her more than the humiliation had. Someone had thought about Lily not as a problem, not as a disruption, not as a late fee or a line on an invoice, but as a child who needed to be safe. Urgent care is ready for her, Ethan said. It is 8 blocks away. They know we are coming. Claire nodded, unable to speak for a second. As she settled Lily into the seat, her daughter whimpered and reached for her hand. Claire climbed in beside her, buckled the strap, and pressed the back of her fingers against Lily's forehead. Still too warm, too tired, too brave. Ethan stood outside the open door, rain misting his dark hair, his gaze fixed not on Claire now, but on the pendant resting against Lily's sweater. Claire, he said quietly, I know this is not the time, but I need to ask one thing before we leave. Claire looked up at him, exhausted enough to be honest and afraid enough to be sharp. You need to ask a lot of things, apparently. He accepted that without defense. Did Ryan ever mention the name Caleb? The name meant nothing, and somehow that made Claire feel worse. She shook her head. No. He said his name was Ryan Mercer. He said he worked in logistics. He said he had no family worth talking about. He said a lot of things. The last sentence came out bitter, and Lily's eyes fluttered, so Claire softened her voice. He was kind at first. He made me believe I had found someone steady. Then when I told him I was pregnant, he vanished slowly. Not all at once. That would have been easier. First missed calls, then excuses, then an apartment with half his things gone and a note saying he was not built for fatherhood. Ethan looked away toward the wet street, and for the first time since Claire had met him, the power around him seemed to crack. Caleb used to run from anything that asked him to stay, he said. Responsibility, family, grief, himself. Claire stared at him. You think Ryan was your brother? I think the pendant was my brother's. I think Preston knows more than he wants to admit. And I think your daughter may have been carrying the only honest piece of Caleb Blackwell left in the world. The driver shifted quietly near the front of the SUV, pretending not to hear. Claire looked down at Lily, at the blonde curls damp against the seat, at the tiny hand wrapped around the silver bird. Her daughter had spent 5 years asking why other children had grandparents, uncles, cousins, people who came to school recitals and birthday breakfasts. Claire had built answers out of gentleness because she had no facts. Now facts were arriving like stormwater, rushing too fast, bringing names she had never heard and family seals hidden in letters. "I do not want money from you," Claire said suddenly. Ethan's eyes returned to hers. "I did not offer money. You will. Men like you always think money is the cleanest way to make complicated things quiet." His face tightened, not with anger, but with the discomfort of being seen clearly. "Then I will not make it quiet. And I do not want Lily used to fix whatever guilt your family has. Neither do I. She is not proof. She is not an heirloom. She is not a Blackwell problem." Ethan nodded once, slow and solemn. "She is a child with a fever who needs a doctor. Everything else can wait until she is safe." That was the first thing he said that Claire fully trusted. She pulled the door closed, but before it latched, Preston Mercer rushed out under the side awning, one hand holding his phone, his tuxedo jacket open, his earlier smugness replaced by a nervous urgency. "Wait," he called. Ethan turned. Preston stopped several feet away, careful now, aware of exactly who he was speaking to. "My aunt is bringing the letter to the hotel. I called her. She kept it all these years because Ryan told her the woman might have a little girl with blue eyes and a silver bird." Claire went still inside the SUV. Lily's eyes opened halfway. Ethan's hand rested on the door frame. "When will she be here?" he asked. Preston swallowed. 20 minutes. Claire looked from Preston to Ethan, then down at Lily's pendant, and the tiny silver wings seemed to catch every light in the rain-dark car. Ethan leaned slightly toward Claire, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Go to urgent care. I will bring the letter to you the moment it arrives." Claire wanted to say no, to demand every answer now, but Lily coughed softly and curled into the overcoat. Motherhood made the choice before pride could speak. Claire nodded. The SUV pulled away from the awning into the wet Chicago night, and through the rear window, she saw Ethan Blackwell standing in the rain with his eyes on the car, while behind him Preston held a phone that might contain the first real truth Ryan Mercer had ever left behind. The urgent care clinic was 8 blocks from the Grand Ellison, but to Claire it felt like crossing an entire life. Rain streaked the SUV windows, turning Chicago's lights into long gold lines, while Lily sat beside her in the child safety seat, half awake and wrapped in Ethan Blackwell's coat, like a small bird inside a dark wing. Claire kept one hand on Lily's knee and the other pressed to her own chest, trying to hold herself together until a doctor could tell her that her daughter was safe. The driver said nothing, but every light seemed to turn green before they reached it, as if the city had quietly stepped aside. At Lakeshore Pediatric Urgent Care, a nurse was already waiting near the entrance with a clipboard and a gentle smile that did not ask questions Claire could not answer. "Lily Whitman," she said. Claire nodded, lifting Lily carefully from the car. "We have a room ready." Those words almost made Claire cry. A room ready. Not a line. Not a form first. Not a tired look from someone behind glass. A room ready for Lily. Within minutes, Lily was sitting on an exam table under a warm blanket, Mr. Button tucked beneath her arm, while a doctor checked her temperature, listened to her breathing, and asked soft questions about her cough, her daycare, and how long the fever had been rising. Claire answered everything as clearly as she could, though her voice kept shaking. The diagnosis was not terrifying, but it was still enough to make her knees weak. A seasonal virus, dehydration from not drinking enough, and exhaustion from the walk and the cold rain. "She needs fluids, fever medicine, and rest," the doctor said. "We will monitor her for a little while, but she is stable." Stable. Claire closed her eyes and lowered her forehead to Lily's hand. "Thank you," she whispered, though she did not know whether she was speaking to the doctor, the nurse, or the piece of the universe that had not taken her child from her tonight. Lily's fingers curled around Claire's. "Mommy," she murmured, "did I make trouble at the fancy place?" Claire lifted her head quickly. "No, baby. You were trying to find me. But next time, you stay where grown-ups can keep you safe." Lily nodded, serious and sleepy. The black coat man was nice. Claire glanced at the coat folded over a chair, the fabric still holding faint rain and expensive cologne. "Yes," she said carefully. He was. She did not know what else to call him. Nice felt too simple. Dangerous felt unfair. Important felt obvious. Connected to Lily felt impossible, and yet the silver bird pendant resting against her daughter's blanket made impossible things harder to deny. 27 minutes after they arrived, the clinic room door opened. Ethan stood there, damp from the rain, his black suit darker at the shoulders, and in his hand was an old cream envelope sealed in faded wax. Preston Mercer stood behind him in the hallway, pale and silent, beside an older woman with red-rimmed eyes who Claire guessed was the aunt. Ethan did not enter without permission. He looked first at Lily, then at Claire. "May I come in?" Claire hesitated only because so much of her life had been built around saying no before strangers could take too much. But Lily was safe for the moment, and the envelope in his hand felt like the answer to a question Claire had been carrying for 5 years without knowing its shape. She nodded. Ethan stepped inside and held the envelope out to her. "It was addressed to you, though not by name. It says, 'For the woman who has my daughter.'" Claire stared at the handwriting. She knew it. Even after all these years, she knew the slant of the letters, the rushed pressure of the pen, the way the Y dipped too low like it always had when Ryan wrote grocery lists or rent reminders, or one of his short apologies after staying out too late. Her hands trembled as she took it. The wax seal was cracked but still visible, a black-winged bird pressed into the center. Ethan stood near the wall, giving her space. Preston looked as if he wanted to vanish. The older woman began to cry quietly in the hallway. Claire opened the envelope with careful fingers. Inside was one folded page and a smaller paper clipped behind it. She unfolded the letter. Ryan's words were not long. They were not enough to fix what he had done, but they were real. He wrote that his name was not Ryan Mercer, that he had been born Caleb Blackwell, that he had left his family after a bitter fight and lived under another name because shame had been easier than forgiveness. He wrote that when Claire told him about the baby, he panicked, not because he did not love her, but because he did not trust himself to be the kind of father a child deserved. He wrote that he planned to come back after finding steady work, but if he failed, the pendant would prove Lily belonged to the Blackwell bloodline and deserved to be protected. Claire's vision blurred before she reached the final line. "My brother Ethan will know what the bird means. He keeps his promises better than I ever did." For a long moment, no one spoke. Lily had fallen asleep, her small hand resting over the pendant as if guarding it in dreams. Claire lowered the letter slowly. Ethan's face had gone still, but his eyes were bright with something he refused to let fall. "I looked for Caleb for years," he said quietly. "I never knew he had a child." Claire swallowed. "He knew about Lily. He still left." "Yes," Ethan said, and there was no excuse in his voice. "He did." That honesty broke something open in her more than any apology could have. Ethan stepped closer, stopping beside the foot of Lily's exam table. "Claire, I cannot undo what my brother did. I cannot give Lily the father she should have had. But I can make sure she is never treated like a secret again." Claire looked at him, exhausted, wary, and trembling on the edge of a future she had not asked for. "And what does that make you?" Ethan looked down at Lily, at the silver bird, at the child who had walked through rain to find her mother and instead found the door to a family that had been missing her before they knew her name. His voice was barely above a whisper when he answered, "If you allow it, it makes me her uncle." Claire held the letter against her chest and tried to breathe. Outside the exam room, Preston shifted nervously. The older woman whispered Caleb's name like a prayer. The doctor moved quietly past the doorway. But inside the room, Lily slept safely beneath a warm blanket, and Ethan Blackwell stood waiting, not demanding, not buying, not claiming, only waiting. Then Lily stirred, opened her eyes just enough to see him, and whispered, "Are you the family from my bird?" Ethan's composure finally cracked. He knelt beside the exam table, keeping his hands folded so Claire could see he would not reach without permission. "I think so, sweetheart," he said softly. Lily considered him with sleepy seriousness. "Then you should not lose Mommy again." Claire felt the words settle over all of them. Ethan looked up at her, and for the first time that night, the stranger in black did not look like a mystery. He looked like a man who had just been given a second chance he knew he did not deserve. "I will not," he said. And Claire, who had walked into the wrong room with $11, a dead phone, and a sick little girl, looked at the letter in her hands and realized the wrong door had not ended her life. It had opened the first one that might finally lead somewhere safe.